You're listening to the Ask Drone U podcast. You ask, we answer your drone questions. Whether you're here to turn your passion into profit or you simply fly for fun, we're a community of learners and teachers who aspire to achieve greatness. We are
Drone U.
Hey everyone, and welcome to another awesome episode of Ask Drone U. Today we have a very special guest, another interview, and I know we've been doing a lot, but remote ID is so important because if you're like me and you love to fly and you don't want to lose those rights to fly, well, then it's time to act. It's time to fight for our rights to fly. So in an effort to help explain how remote ID is going to affect, well, the different types of pilots, we have a very special guest today. And on Ask Drone U, we really haven't talked a lot about FPV pilots, hobbyist pilots, or even RC modelers. But yet it seems like they have the most to lose when it comes to remote ID. That's why I'm so excited to have Dave Messina from the FPVFC group here today. Why? Well, Dave is one of the people that helped Drone U. It was a partnership of working together to get that comment guide that's now been downloaded almost 7,000 times to help this industry get back on its feet. So if you're like me, then you have a lot of deep respect for Dave. Dave, welcome to the show, my friend.
Thank you, Paul. Glad to be here.
So help me understand, what is FPVFC? I mean, I understand that essentially you're fighting for the rights for FPV pilots, but how wide does this blanket go? I mean, who are you representing? Are we talking about Rotor Riot? Are we talking about Flight Test? You know, help us understand what FPVFC does.
So we're a 501c3, so we're a not-for-profit organization. There are four of us that work this. So Josh Cook, Dan Oakes, and David Wallace. And what we're about is advocating to the FAA. We started out as advocating for the FPV flyer. And then in addition, we're working on education for the FPV community. And the objective there is that if we want to aspire to be a community-based organization, and one of the things you have to do is make sure you have a safe set of safety guidelines. So we've got that done. And so as we are advocating for the FPV community, what we've done is gotten really involved with the FAA and the Drone Advisory Committee. I've worked on 3 tasking groups. I'll be presenting at the next DAC at the end of February at the UAS facility map segment, and that'll be live streamed. And what that has done for us and help provide better support for the community, as well as broaden our scope of who we can help, is we've come in contact with a lot of people in manned and unmanned aviation manufacturers, associations, or organizations. And so we worked in talking to AMA. So a lot of what we do is applicable to classic radio control or surface radio control. And so while certainly our mission and focus is FPV, almost everything we do is applicable to all recreational UAS.
Wow, that's awesome. And I think it's really powerful too, because as many FPV racers watch this, and if they don't know who you are, they're probably saying, what is this like older guy talking about FPV? But you are the structure. You are the group of people that's kind of, in my eyes, unifying the recreational group in a way that, frankly, I think the AMA has failed miserably. And I don't want to throw anyone under the bus because, you know, we're really grateful that the AMA came back out after they put out their comment guide and said, okay, hey, look, don't copy and paste your comments. That's not going to help. So, I mean, would you say that FPVFC really does act as the unification method to represent the interests of the recreational flyers?
Humbly, I hope so. I mean, that's something that we would like to aspire to. It's one of the questions is what gives us the authority to represent the various communities, and we try to earn that every day. And so, with the material that we put out there, we've reached out and talked to the AMA, most of the manufacturers and retailers in the RC and FPV community. So we're really about collaborating with the FAA and working with whomever, as long as they have a view that, hey, this NPRM is something that we need to try to get changed around so it's more helpful or so that it's more beneficial to all of us in UAS.
Yeah, I would say as the NPRM for remote ID as published or as proposed, excuse me, would go out, it seems like, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong here, but you guys have the most to lose. Is that right?
We do. We think we do, because if you think about, what are the aspects, and we've got a 24-page set of comments now, and I was writing it down before we started talking, and there are connectivity issues, there's amateur built, there's the mission and airspace restrictions, there's new things called FRIAs, as you know, the FAA recognized identification area. There are the proposed dates. There's registration, and then there are various assumptions, and all of those hit those of us in recreational really hard. And I can start. The connectivity one I know is dear to you. We're pushing for just broadcast, nothing on the internet. And oh, by the way, there are a number of organizations have come out, and they're almost exactly saying the same things and the same statements we are. One of them is the AOPA, the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association.
That was surprising.
And it was delightful, very coherent piece of work, and that's good. And the Alliance for Drone Innovation, same thing. A very well-respected group and very similar views on what we've come out with. So if you'd like, I can work through some of those items or handle this however you like.
Oh, I appreciate that, Dave, and I really appreciate your humility, as many FPV pilots do as well. But I think what we should do is really just break down how these proposed remote ID rules would, maybe transform what it looks like to fly from these various positions as pilots. But before we get started, I'm just really curious, for those out there who don't know, how long have you been flying?
So probably, classic RC, probably about 45 years.
Wow.
And so,
so your heart's in the right place.
Yeah. And, for, racing drones and assembling them, soldering them together, since, early 2016.
Wow. Wow. All right. Well, let's break this down. So do you remember the first time you took flight?
With a drone, absolutely.
Well, with an RC plane, and the first time you took flight.
That I do. I was 14. And
do you remember where you were? Do you remember the aircraft? And do you remember how you felt?
Oh, yeah. I was, interestingly, we've moved 9 times, but I'm back in my hometown after 28 years. And so it was in a field in this hometown in upstate New York. The plane took off, and I didn't know what I was doing, and it augured right in. So that was my first flight, and that taught me to go get some help and have an instructor and a buddy box to learn how to fly.
But you were still excited, right?
Oh, it was great. Absolutely. It was had an Enya 45 on it, and so this is antique in today's standards. So
let me ask you, if the proposed remote ID went through as proposed right now, and the local AMA field that you flew on doesn't make it as a FRIA, and you wanted to take, let's say that you have a 14-year-old son out to the field, and you couldn't do that, how is that going to make you feel?
Well, it's awful. It's devastating. I'm very fortunate that I have a 5-acre yard that I mow. So that would also have to be a FRIA. So if with the current publication, I could not fly quads, I couldn't fly fixed wing there, which I do both, and I'd have to find a field that is a FRIA. And so in that 12-month period where it's going to be allowed to register a FRIA, and then the FAA anticipates that they will decline over time, you'd end up driving longer and longer distance. So the field that I fly at now is 1.5 miles away. The next one is 40 miles away. So, and I've done that when I lived in Texas, and it's a burden to get out to the field and then come back. Of course, I never did things like forget a battery or a transmitter, so that never happens.
That's good. That's good. So for people who don't really understand, when it comes to hobby or recreational flight, if under the proposed rules, if they don't meet the standard or broadcast sections of remote ID, meaning they can't connect to the internet and they're not pushing out a broadcast signal, then those drones, which would be RC planes, RC helicopters, FPV drones, Cinewhoops, micro whoops, whatever you want to call them, all of those are now going to be restricted to FRIAs. And for those of you who don't know, a FRIA is a federally restricted identification area. Is that right?
FAA recognized identification area.
Recognize, that's the word I messed up. Recognize. But here's the thing. Over the years, we've had more AMA fields building up over time across the United States. But with the FRIA setup, what they're saying is that we can only create these fields to fly for the next 12 months, and that's it. After that, we're done.
Right, no more applications, and all of the AMA fixed sites where they got the MOAs from the FAA to say, okay, you can now fly, UAS there. All the AMA fields have to reapply through a CBO to become a FRIA, and then they have to be FAA approved.
And they haven't defined what the CBO is, have they?
Correct.
Right.
Not defined.
All right, so let's bring this full circle. So long and the short of it is the overall area in which recreational pilots can fly is going to go from a large majority of the airspace to probably less than 1% of the total airspace of the entire United States, which is why you are fighting so avidly to protect the rights to fly. So when you and I got together with some other people and came up with some ways to combat these negative efforts that came out from the FAA, we came up with some ideas, and I know you've gone much further than that now, but we know that the only way to fight this is to really comment on the NPRM, and it's how you comment is so important. And I know there's a lot of FPV racers out there that are like fired up just like me, and they're angry just like me. But what we have to understand is that like you and like me, we're both humans. And what's the human reaction if someone comes screaming and yelling at you? It's like, whoa, right? You don't really want to help that person out. But when you come to someone and say, hey, I've got a problem and I'd really like your help, right? As a human, you have this innate response to want to help someone. So in the same way, we want to comment that way. What's the problem? What's the solution? So one of the biggest issues that I see with recreation is how we're absolutely killing STEM education, killing recreational flights, and really killing the funnel for people to get a chance to try drones and then figure out, hey, I can turn this into a business? What? So what is FPVFC out there? Well, I keep moving way forward. We haven't even answered the questions. How does this affect the hobbyists? Down and dirty, really quick. I keep skipping ahead. I'm sorry, Dave.
No problem. So first, as we touched on the FRIA, so where I can fly, so parks, school grounds, backyard, gone unless it's established as a FRIA. So where I can fly is just very limited. Next is the equipment and the availability of it. So if I'm flying whatever, if it's a fixed wing RC, non-equipped, no remote ID, if it's a racing drone, if it's an FPV with a GoPro on it, that's all limited to a FRIA. So how do I get that equipment? So if we see a drop-off in manufacturers, it's logical that batteries, flight controllers, video transmitters, every component that we put onto our FPV drones will be more difficult to obtain. And then we don't need to get into the various legislation that's happening, but we anticipate that prices will likely go up and availability will go down on various components. And then the underlying software that we use and depend on, things like Betaflight, could be at risk because you have a much, much smaller base using it.
Wow. So long and the short, if I understand the equipment part of this, is that are we going to be able to still fly the same FPV drones if the rules go through as is?
Only in a FRIA.
So if there's no FRIA, then we can't fly those drones, and they're useless.
That's correct.
Wow.
That's correct. And if you make it compliant to a limited remote UAS, then you cannot fly them inside because they won't light up. They won't be able to take off. So that's one of the reasons why we don't like the limited remote ID UAS, because that says, I need to see a GPS and I need an internet connection, and if I don't have either of those, I don't start up. I cannot take off.
Yeah, and I just see so many problems with that. And just to clarify for everyone, you and I have the same perspective. We are saying no network RID at all, and I'm just completely against it. Guys, when your friends ask you, why are you so fired up about remote ID? Just say this: hey, you got a car, right? You got a license plate, right? Well, if you cut off that lady over there, she can't figure out where you live. What if your license plate had a monthly fee? You got automated tickets because your car is connected to the internet 100% of the time. And, oh yeah, that lady that you just cut off, she can see where you live. How would you feel? Right? I mean, that's how I break it down for everyone. I'm not sure how you do it, but frankly, I just think I don't really even understand how anyone's going to comply with the proposal as written, but I think it's important to help people understand it might not have been the FAA that quote unquote wrote this. So I think they've got their hands tied behind their back. And I think the comments that we use are going to help them fight other government agencies that are trying to impose these laws. So, all right, FPV racers, we talked about the hobbyists, and you mentioned the RC planes, the fixed wing stuff too, but so whether it's hobby, fixed wing, FPV, Cinewhoop drones, everything that we have now will only work in a FRIA, and that's it. So the problem that we need to solve is inhibit network-based operations and eliminate manufacturer standards, because, I mean, how can we expect the FAA to know how to certify a manufacturer?
Right, and that's what, like, right after the connectivity, the amateur built restrictions are enormous for the recreational folks as well, because 90, huge percentage of all of the drones that all of us have. I've got 16 drones. 15 of them are that I built. One of them I purchased, and so that means that 0 of those would be able to fly outside of a FRIA, because I've sourced the components and put it together. The only way you can fly as a limited or standard per the NPRM is if you purchase all of the components from a single producer that has been approved by the FAA, and then you can assemble it. And so we have recommended some alternatives because, as you were pointing out, one of the ways to respond in the comments is to propose a solution. So we've proposed a solution for that exotic or advanced beyond visual line of sight, that where remote ID does make sense, okay, put a transponder on that you can carry from drone to drone, and that way I don't have to create or purchase all of these separate devices.
Well, I agree 100%, and I think what you're mentioning also kind of mirrors or parallels the ADS-B system without it being ADS-B, which means, again, it's a broadcast-only system. It's not displaying pilot location, and it's not causing privacy issues with pilots. I mean, we have been saying here at Drone U that one of the things that we don't like about network or limited RID is the fact that the public will have access to this information about pilots. And, that's got a lot of us concerned, because there's a lot of fear-mongering people out there that unfortunately believe everything they hear in the news, and they think that these drones are spying on them, when in reality they're trying to save their house from a wildfire by inspecting the power line that's nearby. So that's got a lot of us concerned, but it begs the question, and I think this is a good question for you, since you do represent the FPV community. What's going to happen if we're broadcasting the location of children?
Yeah, then are we violating COPA and that type of laws?
What are those laws for people who don't know?
It is you're not allowed to communicate the identity and location of individuals under 13 years old.
Wow. Well, this is really gonna cause some issues. What do you see as the ultimate solution, Dave? The floor is yours. What needs to happen?
Well, I'm hopeful and optimistic that we see a recreational understanding, or an exception, so that if we're flying under 400 feet, which is the current restriction, and then we are able to fly with a registration for the pilot, not each aircraft, and we're able to fly within a set geographic area. If it's uncontrolled airspace, which is most of what the United States is, we're hoping that we can just fly like we can today. And then if the FAA does not accept that, then our recommendation is today we have the ability to request a flight or permission to fly through Lance, through an app that is on our phone and that taps into the facility maps. And we get authorization to fly up to an appropriate altitude with a max of 400 feet above the ground. So we could expand Lance to uncontrolled airspace. So if you have a non-equipped UAS, the idea would be, all right, I'd like to be able to fly in uncontrolled airspace wherever and any of my drones, just like I am today. And if that's unacceptable, because we do understand that the FAA wants to know where every drone is in the air, then maybe we could adopt something like we do for controlled airspace today using a Lance application. And then the third step is finally, I've been working on beyond visual line of sight task forces or tasking groups with the FAA. And so this is a lot more sophisticated. And I am an advocate of remote ID for beyond visual line of sight. I mean, this gets a lot more serious. The risks are higher. You're flying over people. And so, that makes a lot of sense to have a broadcast. I don't see a need for internet there either, but broadcast remote identification and any redundancy will probably also be a thing as we go on over the next couple of years.
That's actually a really brilliant solution because you're allowing the FAA and really DHS to get what they're asking for, which is you're just saying, okay, I'm going to go fly. That's it, right? So they know that your vehicle and you are there, which is essentially what they're asking for. Right?
Yeah, you have the location and the identification.
Bingo. Yep. Brilliant. It's amazing how simple a solution that there is for a quote-unquote complex problem.
And this is, today we have 1.3 million recreational drones in the United States. So what we're talking about is a population of model aircraft that are 7 times larger than the classic RC. So there are a lot of these, and retrofitting them to add on RID is not viable because if we were to add on a transponder, then it's limited to a FRIA. So this is why the NPRM is it's intermingled, and so you have to be comprehensive in the response and the comments that this is the solution we're proposing.
Wow. Where can people find your solution? Because there's a lot of complexities to this, and I really feel like it's confusing a lot of people. And the reason that we wrote our guide the way that we did was to say, okay, instead of dealing with these little intricacies about, okay, if I have a transponder, then I can't fly in a FRIA, it's like taking this top-down approach, kind of as you've mentioned, right? Like, okay, no network, right? Broadcast only. Let's just do Lance in the whole country, not really hard. And, no manufacturer requirements, because I don't know if it's even possible right now to get what the FAA is asking for. I mean, a lot of these parts are being sourced from very different areas of the world. And I'm not sure that there is one store that has all those parts sourced from one location. That being said, where can we find your comment guide so we can get a comprehensive view as recreational hobbyist FPV pilots on how to intelligently respond to increase the effectiveness of our comments?
Well, if you go to fpvfc.org, so fpvfc.org, that's our website, and there we've got 2 pages dedicated to the NPRM. One provides a 6-page explanation of this is what the 319-page document means, and so we tried to distill it. We've got an FAQ. We also created a talking points document, but then we've also got our document, and it's a little more dense because the audience for our comments is 24 pages, and it includes the reference. And so we anticipate the FAA people to be reading that, so it's referencing their document, so we want it approachable by them. So all of that is available, can be downloaded from our fpvfc.org website. And we're a nonprofit. We got all volunteer workers, and so it's if the more people that use it, the better.
And just a quick note about the volunteers for everyone out there. I know you guys don't get to see what goes on behind the curtain, but no one, in my opinion, has worked harder on remote ID than Dave. And Dave, I personally thank you. Seriously.
Well, I appreciate it, and it's the rest of the three other guys: Josh Cook, Dan Oakes, and David Wallace. And it's a great team of guys, and we're working together and also helping out and participating. And hopefully, we'll talk about it about the protest that the UFDA crew is also putting together at the end of this month.
So wait, let's hear about that, because I haven't. I mean, I know the website and I've heard about it from you, but I haven't really seen much information about that crawling through the internet. So you're telling me a bunch of like-minded pilots are going to go stand up for our rights in front of the FAA building? They
are, and so it's scheduled for sure. It's Saturday, February 29, and they'll have some activities Friday, February 28. And so you can imagine when I heard about this for the first time, I was like, oh, you're going to go to Washington, D.C. and stand in front of the FAA. I've been working over a year to try to work collaboratively and get to know these people, and you're going to be protesting. And so I was like, oh my goodness. So we've talked to the UFDA crew. The lead member of their bunch of guys is an events planner. So they're doing this right. They're getting the permits. They're talking to folks around the Capitol and getting all of the approvals they need. And so we feel that it will be done professionally. And we're sending Josh out from Arizona to be there in Washington. And it will literally be in front of the FAA building. And if you look at saveourhobby.com is the URL. And it is in front of L'Enfant, so it's right there.
L'Enfant Plaza, which is one of the biggest metro stations in all of D.C. And I know that because I worked for a law firm in D.C. growing up there, and they told me to take these court dockets to L'Enfant Plaza. And so I got on the metro and went to L'Enfant Plaza and called my boss, and he's like, no, the L'Enfant Plaza conference room that was named after all the metro stations. So that was one of my first mess ups. So, but I have to say, I think it's smart to not fly. Do not fly during the protest, because you are not breaking FAA regulations at that point. You are breaking federal law at that point for security. You will be arrested. It is not good.
Yeah. It's not just like a little civil fine and it's an issue. And I'm really proud of the UFDA crew. They've been explicit with everyone. Don't bring a mini whoop. Don't bring any aircraft. Just don't bring it. No one is going to be flying, and they understand that. And they every time they talk to folks about coming down, they're like, don't take it out of your bag. Don't bring it with you.
It's funny. You're like, don't take it out of your bag, and I'm getting this like image in my head of like a whole new way of protesting, like taking a broomstick and attaching it to the bottom of my FPV racer and raising it up and, like, fight for the rights. So.
Well, some of the guys were suggesting kites, and then, but we said, don't taunt people. This is, we want a peaceful, respectful protest, and that's the sentiment that's coming through. And they wanted to raise $5,000 to cover expenses. Last time I checked, they were at $7,600. So. They've gotten good support, and they have. It looks to be a good turnout to the protest.
That is so inspiring to hear. That is really inspiring. How do you feel like the fight is going overall? Because it seems like groups that we thought, just as you said earlier, are pushing out comment guides and articles that are kind of following our lead. And I don't mean to try to sound egotistical, but you and I were the first group. Your team and our team were the first groups to put out a comment guide. And are you feeling good about this? Are you feeling like we're making some traction here?
Well, I'm cautiously optimistic. And so when we see organizations like AOPA or the Alliance for Drone Innovation, when we see the EAA, when we see Kitty Hawk, and their comments are largely, if not exactly, in line with what we put out in our guides. And so that's hugely important.
I'm surprised that you would raise Kitty Hawk, because they want to segregate the airspace to 200 feet.
Yeah, and I would characterize that as generally in line. And so they brought out points about the manufacturing restrictions being too restrictive. They understand, and they talked a little bit about the connectivity. But in large part, we're in a similar view that the NPRM is too restrictive and needs to be throttled back in order to be They also brought out the point that many folks have, which is unreasonable regulations will result in large-scale non-compliance, and that's not what we want.
True. I think it's going to make it worse for everyone else. I do find it interesting, though, and I want to make this point because, FPV racers, I feel like I connect with more than a lot of commercial drone pilots. But I want to make this point really, really apparent. It's interesting to me, Dave, how some of these companies, a lot like Kitty Hawk, a lot like AMA, have put out all these, marketing pieces about remote ID, but then they switch their tune last minute because they're realizing, oh, wait, this is a real problem. And I mean, even KH has been accused of really pushing Lance for recreational pilots to begin with. So there's some botched credibility going on here. But you know what? At the end of the day, we've got to be grateful that at least people are changing their tune because they're realizing it's just not going to work.
I had the privilege of being in Washington at the FAA offices on January 14, and we were selected as one of the 12 companies for the UAS Knowledge Test Administration. So this is a cohort. It's not selected, but this was the cohort providing feedback for the administration of the test. And I said, when we were there, I said, we really are grateful to the FAA because they've done something with this NPRM. They've done something that's really fantastic, and they've brought all of us together. People who wouldn't answer the phone are now answering the phone, and obviously very much tongue in cheek. But it has allowed us to, we don't agree on everything, but boy, we agree on these core things. And the voice back to the FAA has to be unified, has to be, just as you said, professional, polite, and productive. And that's what the comments are going to be from FPVFC.
I think you just coined a new triple P, and I really like it. But you know what? It was funny. Vic and I were just talking about this. I make a lot of statements tongue in cheek as well. And I just think it is so important just to not be afraid to ask hard questions. And, Vic has a point about me that oftentimes I can do a much better job at how I deliver these tongue-in-cheek comments. But at the end of the day, it's this asking of the hard questions that I think is unifying us, So, don't feel bad about it, Dave. I'm on your side on this one.
And we also just released a video that Josh Cook did last night. We released that today. So it's, once again, a more approachable vehicle. And Josh is very much charged up, and the video is a little edgier than my button down normal process. So it's a nice compliment to for the two of us, and both representing FPVFC.
I feel like you're the more polished, the
old guy.
Yeah, you're the guy that's getting, all right, kids, come on, let's get together. If we're gonna do something, we got to do it together, But the thing is that. Another reason I respect you so greatly is because you have the experience, you have the practical knowledge, and I think the nature of these DAC meetings, the ARC, all these committees, they are devoid of real pilots that are actually out there flying. Now, there's one guy, and I gotta get this guy's name, from CNN, and he said it so beautifully in the last DAC.
Probably F.E. Needham from CNN Air, and he participates in a lot of the DAC work, and he created the animation for us for the UAS facility maps. Great guy, and you'll see some nice artwork.
Awesome. Well, if someone wants to send me his address, I'm going to send him a box of gold. So, he's really the one that's out there saying, hey, we really don't have a lot of people who are actually out there, and this is their livelihood. And it's being overrun by the cellular carriers. It's being overrun by the security agencies. It's being overrun by, frankly, people who have no idea how to fly. I mean, literally, I went into one of those meetings myself, and I asked a question before they started, and I said, can anyone tell me what is the ultimate indicator of a safe flight in the first 30 seconds of flight? Dead silence. Dead silence. And you know what? Going back to your position for FPV, I really do feel like you are providing a more polished kind of traditional stance to help fight the FPV group. And while a lot of FPV racers would probably agree with me that we don't want to like assimilate to the American politics and government system and wear suits and whatnot, sometimes you've got to get on other people's level to communicate properly. It's not about, what you're saying, but more so how you say it. What is it? The 38-55-7 rule, which is it's not what you say, it's how you say it in your body language. And you're playing that role. And I don't think a lot of people would stand up for that.
We're trying to work from within. And one of the, as you look at the Drone Advisory Committee, it's 35 seats, and effectively 2 of them have operator representation. One is DJI, the other is AMA. And of course, DJI is also a manufacturer. But if you look around the room, there are a lot of people, a lot of gray hair, but it's also a lot of decades and decades of experience with the FAA and with the manned aviation manufacturers, organizations, and associations. And they have been really open to us. And once they see that, that we're able or willing to sign up to a tasking group, do work, take minutes, go out and do research, bring back work product, that gives us credibility to, okay, so now, we're interested, we'll help you. This is how you should structure your comments. And, it's really ill-advised to do the following. And that's been invaluable for us to quickly get an education on the right way to approach the FAA. So I'm cautiously optimistic to circle back to your question.
Well, Dave, again, you're doing a great job. So just one last time, where can everyone find your most recent comment guide and materials to help them comment on the proposed remote ID?
On FPVFC.org, and that's our website. And also you can find us FPV Freedom Coalition on Facebook as well. But the guide and all of the materials are on 2 specific pages on the website.
Fantastic, Dave. Thank you for your time, sir. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Paul. Appreciate it.
That's going to do it for us today, everyone. Hopefully you will go out and make a comment or even an additional comment full of fervor, intelligent, but productive. The triple P, right? What was that, Dave?
Polite, professional, productive.
Love it. 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 Get out there, ladies and gentlemen. You got to comment. Save the dream of flight, not only for yourself, but your future kids and your grandkids. Because if you're like us, then you love to take flight as well. That's going to do it for our show today. Thank you again for listening in. Please don't forget to leave us a review wherever you watch the show, as it helps other people find this information. And right now, we need everyone's help. So, will you finally share the show? I hope so. My name is Paul, and this is another episode of Ask Drone U.